welcome to Out of the Box Radio with me, your host, Christine Blasdale. Out of the Box Radio is a weekly podcast of audible ear candy dedicated to bringing a fresh perspective on this thing that we call life. And each and every week, we're going to be diving into the topics that matter most with lively conversations on issues such as health, wellness, and transformational healing, all with the goal of creating a better world and becoming a happier human being. I will be your tour guide for this epic adventure, and each and every week we're going to be embarking on a journey with the ultimate goal being transformation to our highest potential. And now, let's get out of the box. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Out of the Box Radio. I am your host, Christine Blasdale, and you have tuned into a very special program because, as we all know, it's holiday season. And while we may deck the halls and jingle the bells, there's probably something else that might be jiggling as well during the holidays. First of all, did you know that the average person consumes between 2,000 and 2,500 calories per day? One holiday meal, just one, can come in at over 3,000 calories alone. Did you also know that how much we eat is actually deeply influenced by our invisible companion microbes? What are these things that are inside of us? We're going to find out in this hour. I want to welcome to the program Dr. Bill Miller. He's a 30-year veteran physician in both academic and private practice. He's the author of the Microcosm Within, Evolution and Extinction in the Hologenome. And we're going to find out what a hologenome is in this program. Dr. Bill Miller, welcome to Out of the Box Radio.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be on the show.
Okay, let's, because the whole title of your book, The Microcosm Within, Evolution and Extinction in the Hologenome. Doctor, what's a hologenome?
Well, first, I want to congratulate you on saying the word properly, because it's very unfamiliar. Most people don't know it, but here's the critical thing. Recent research teaches us something about ourselves that we never knew before. When you look in the mirror, when I look in the mirror, I see my gorgeous self. I say, Brad Pitt, eat your heart out. But the fact is, I see myself as a singularity, a single organism. And what else can I think? That's what I see in the mirror. But here's the thing, Christine. That's not the way that I'm actually experiencing the environment. And that's not how nature appraises me. That's not how nature regards me. Nature cares about my cellular being. And the critical aspect of the cells that I'm talking about, we're all cells, we're all made up of cells. I think most people know that. But the critical aspect of the cells is that they're a complicated, intimate network between our own personal cells, my Bill Miller cells, and microbial companions. These microbes aren't just hanging around on us. We used to think that that's all they did. Now they know they are intimately, absolutely part of almost every one of our functions, from our moods to the functioning of our nervous system, our digestive system, our weight, our satiety, our appetites. All of these are being reciprocally influenced by these microbes that are in us and on us. We can't do without them, and they can't live the kinds of lives that they want without us. And so we're this collective type of organization instead of the singularity that we perceive.
So, again, what's the hologenome, Doc?
The hologenome is, let me be very direct. The astounding thing is what we found out, that the proportion of the cells that are microbes and the proportion that are our own personal cells. The microbes outnumber our own personal cells by an estimate of about 10 to 1. When you add up all the DNA in those microbes, the microbial cells and the viruses are all very much smaller than our own personal cells that have nuclei. They're bigger cells. But when you add up all the DNA that those microbes have, and you add up all the DNA that I have, my Bill Miller DNA and my Bill Miller cells, microbes outnumber our DNA by 100 to 1. The totality of those fractions, the part that's microbial DNA, the part that is my genetic complement. Altogether, that's called the hologenome or a holobiont. And these terms may be unfamiliar now, but going forward, they're going to be crucially important to medicine and how we regard ourselves and how we deal with our health problems.
I have heard that really the root of so much of our health issues is in the gut or with the intestines, and I wanted to know what your opinion of that is, Doctor. If you think that obviously a well-functioning intestinal, through elimination or the health of your intestines, is that a status of how healthy you would be as a human being?
Absolutely. And all of this is going to be pretty new to your listeners because it's pretty new to physicians and scientists. Up until recently, when I went to medical school a while ago now, certainly, I was taught that these microbes, I said at the beginning, they were just hanging around. Some of them had a kind of slightly important function, but mostly they're additive. They kind of latch on to our structure. Think of a human body as an architecture, and the microbes just kind of hang around. Now we know it's totally different. These microbes are critical aspects of our immune system, our metabolism. The gut, in particular, has perhaps 100 trillion or more microbes. They are all important to how healthy we are. And we are finding out that dysfunction in the composition of the microbes in the gut can lead to a very surprising wide range of diseases, including diabetes 2, type 2 diabetes, many immune disorders. We believe that they're going to be linked to arthritis, to Alzheimer's, many nervous system dysfunctions, possibly to multiple sclerosis. The list goes on. In fact, microbes in the gut absolutely influence our moods and our behaviors, and they definitely influence our weight and our obesity, our levels of obesity, what our appetites are. When do we get satisfied with a meal? We'll talk about holiday eating as the time goes on. But the gut is a primary center of our health. But I just want your listeners to know, we know much more about the gut now than we did before. We're still learning. We're just on the cusp of beginning to learn the most important things. But what the other important thing to understand is what I'm going to be saying about the gut tonight. We will find that there are equally important influences from the microbial, what's called the microbiome. That's the types of microbes, the viruses and the bacteria that are in any part of our body. The microbiome that's part of our respiratory system will turn out to be important. The microbiome that is on our skin, in our hair follicles. In fact, Christy, when I went to medical school, I was taught that the inside of the human body, except for the internals of the gut, were sterile. Well, that's just completely wrong. As it turns out, every part of your body has microbes because you're a composite organism. You're a collective. You're collaborative. And there is no part of your body that doesn't have microbes. Tumors have microbes. Tumors, in fact, many cancers are due to infectious diseases and to what is called dysbiosis. That means a breakdown of the normal microbiome. And so we're just on the verge of learning an amazing amount of medical information that's going to be very important, and we'll touch on this later. But the gut is the area we understand best, and as we understand the gut, we'll gain new tools to see how there are a range of influences from the other cellular ecologies that make us what we are.
When you talk about the microbiome or these bacteria and viruses that are in our bodies, are you also talking about or referring to parasites, or is that completely different?
No, actually, here's the important thing. That's a terrific question, Christine.
Well, thank you.
It's complicated because we as physicians were taught, I certainly learned, that bugs are bad and they have to be fought. And certainly, we can identify certain bugs that are just plain bad for us. For example, Ebola or diphtheria or the microbe that causes diphtheria or plague, the microbe that causes plague. Of course they're bad. But what we're learning is that there's an enormous subtlety, that the range of what's bad for us and what's good for us is not absolutely stark. So, for example, there are certain microbes that we can categorize them as almost always good for us. There's another set of microbes that we can categorize as frankly terrible for us, but those are only at the extreme ends of a huge middle, a gray zone. And in that gray zone are enormous numbers and types of microbes that are both good or bad for us depending on circumstances. There's a special name for it now. It's called a pathobiont. It means that it's sometimes good and sometimes bad, and it depends on the context. Let me give you a specific example for the gut. Some of your listeners may know of or have even suffered from an infection in the gut from a microbe called Clostridia difficile. If you ever have that as an overt infection, it's misery, terrible diarrhea. It's life-threatening. What is true, though, is a low level of Clostridia is fine and probably beneficial for the total health and ecology of your gut. But if it gets out of control and it overpopulates its normal balance point, it becomes a pathogen. So it can be good under one context and deadly under another. And that's the complicating aspect of learning about the microbiome, is learning all the varieties of the gray zones that live in between, which were totally invisible to us up until very recently.
So there's good microbes and there's bad microbes, and then there's microbes that are both good and bad.
That's right. And it'll depend on our life cycle, the time of our life, the stresses that we're under. For example, we know that there are essential viruses that are good for us. And it may even be that many of the herpes virus, in the big herpes virus family, serve important positive functions for us. But we all know if we get cold sores under stress, that's a certain herpes virus that's suddenly activated. Under one set of conditions, it's latent. It's really doing no known harm. Under another set of conditions, it's causing you discomfort. It is even possible that in the latent state, when it's hit, it might even be doing something good. But again, depending on the circumstances, at times of great emotional stress, for example, most of us have experienced where we get a cold sore or something like that. We call it a cold sore, but actually, in most circumstances, it's related to an immunological imbalance, and oftentimes that's related to stress.
We're vastly approaching the holidays, and as we all know, our well, at least here in North America, the temperatures dip. It's a little colder. We're wearing more clothes. There seems to be more cookies, more sweets, more carbs, and all of that stuff. It's the holidays, okay? And people celebrating more alcohol too, as well. So around the holidays, would you like to give us a little bit of kind of like a little bit of a sampling of what we consume and what that does to our guts?
Sure, that would be terrific. Let me say first, I was on a different interview on this topic, and the host said, after I mentioned the things I'm about to say, gee, but they don't sound so new. Well, I'll tell you what, they're new because we understand why they're effective in a scientific way that we didn't know before. So let me just say, what did grandma tell you to do? Maybe your grandma told you to do. My grandma said, slow down when you're eating. And I'm going to explain why that's important. I'm going to also explain why waiting 20 full minutes until you decide on whether or not to have that second dessert or a dessert at all works. And here's the different thing that we know now from scientific data that we didn't know before. As I've said, to understand a human being now, you have to understand the microbiome that lives within us and on us. And here's what we've learned about the topic of what's called satiety, meaning to feel full, to feel as though you're sated, that you've had enough to eat. We now know from experiments, very novel experiments done in France actually, that whether or not you feel full, it's still hard to wrap my mind around it, is more due to my microbes than to my own cells. So here's what I was taught in medical school. You start eating, your cells start to digest the food, the enzymes are innumerable and they do their digestive work. They break down the food into nutrients. The nutrients circulate into the cells that line the stomach and the parts of the stomach that are close to it, called the duodenum and small bowel. And as this happens, those cells send out the cues, the chemical cues that go to your brain that tell you that you are full. Well, it's true. Your cells can do that. But actually, about 90% of the actual activity of making you feel full is happening from the microbes in your gut that are receiving the nutrition that you're eating, breaking down those nutrients into the metabolites that they utilize, and then they start to send metabolites out of their own cellular structures. These then contact the sensitive cells of the lining of the stomach and the connections to the stomach. And the nerves that are there respond, and they start to send signals to what's called a satiety center in your brain. And so the actual center of activity are the bioactive molecules that the microbes in your gut are sending out. And here's the crucial difference, and this is why eating slowly and waiting works. When the food first hit your gut and your microbes get their first dose of food as nutrients, they respond by saying, "Oh, I'm so happy. Thank you." And what do microbes do when they're happy? They reproduce. And so they go into a phase of rapid reproduction. When they reach a certain limit, and they've experimentally shown that in general, that's about 1 billion extra microbes, they start to change their metabolism. They're full. And they start to send out a separate, different protein complex. And that's the one that attaches to the cells of the lining of your stomach and sends the signal that you're full. And so why would you eat more slowly? Why would you wait 20 minutes in order to determine whether to have the next dessert? Well, because you're giving your microbes a chance to grow and for them to reproduce happily in the nutrient-rich environment which you provided them. So when grandma said slow down, she knew from experience that would work. It was like a nostrum, a family thing. But there's really excellent science behind it, but coming from an angle that no one had known until a few years ago. So those are two things you can do. You can enjoy your meal, savor the flavor of your food, slow down when you're eating. When you're done with the main course, step aside. Don't make any decision about dessert one way or another. Just wait 20 minutes. Maybe you'll decide to have 12 desserts after 20 minutes. But we all know, we've all experimented. And you feel a little different, and you'll just have less. The other thing that experiments show is that the microbes don't send out their signals as well with fat as other foods. So if you send them a holiday meal that's just bustling with fats, as opposed to other proteins and simple carbohydrates, they react much more slowly, and it's not what they exactly prefer. And so their reproductive rate is slower. So if you can design your meal that's still satisfying, in which the fat content is lower, that's one other way to stop yourself from eating too much. And then in preparation for the holiday, you can do a little bit of experimentation. I'm a big believer that everybody can be their own research scientist. And here's what I mean by that. No two people are alike. Each person's microbiome is quite unique. We share a lot as human beings. There's a lot of cross-connection, Christine. My microbiome is pretty much like yours, but only pretty much. And the devil can be in the details of the differences. Although they could not be slight on a percentage basis, it can manifestly change the way I react to one set of foods than you do. So we all have different tastes. We all are accustomed to human beings have different tastes. and different things that they like. Some people like sugary things, some people like sour things. You know what I mean. The same thing it relates to how you're going to manipulate your microbiome. So you can experiment with that. You can start the holiday season by trying something that's starting to prove to be a pretty effective way of helping people lose weight, which is to keep their calories constant, but divided into smaller meals. Instead of having 3 big meals a day, have 5 smaller meals a day, but keep the calories just the same.
Right.
It fools your gut into thinking that it's fuller earlier and helps you control your satiety centers. Also, people can experiment with prebiotics and probiotics. There's a lot of emerging information that we can manipulate gut microbiome towards a solution set that works for us by experimenting with prebiotics and probiotics and seeing whether that works best for you. Again, there's no way for me to give advice, even with all the things that I've come across, and tell you exactly what will work for you. I mean, I know for sure that slowing down when eating will work. I know waiting 20 minutes works for everybody. But when it comes to which prebiotics or what probiotics or what pattern of general food intake will work for your weight management, that's for you to experiment. But here's the message I want your listeners to learn. You can't jump around every 3 days. Anything you try, if you want to try a new prebiotic, you want to try some kind of a product with chicory root in it, for example, or you're going to freak out with asparagus and bananas, which are good sources of prebiotics. You got to give it like 6 full weeks to see how it works on you. We're dealing with the microbiome, and it does not change overnight. Only in drastic circumstances, really, that's pathology. When you're going to nudge it into its best configuration for you, you've got to approach it in a scientific manner. That means you have to give it its time to make its alterations. So you've got to, and it might take, this is a project, we're learning new things. It might take you 6 months or a year to learn what's right for you. But I encourage everybody who's listening to take control of their lives and give different things a try. Try a prebiotic yogurt for 6 weeks. See if that works for you. See if it can be combined with multiple smaller meals per day, the same number of calories. There are no miracles in weight management. There are no miracles for the holidays. But there's sound, rational, scientific reasons for going about doing things in a way that isn't so very different from in the past, but now has an extremely solid scientific basis.
Now, you mentioned prebiotics and probiotics. I am familiar, and I think our listeners are a little bit familiar with probiotics, but in case they're not, can you tell us what prebiotics are and what probiotics are and why they're important?
Okay. This is really an emerging field. It's not new, but I'll tell you the popularity of it and its influence on our popular culture is really gaining traction. And again, there's a lot of very good emerging science to support that this is not just some flash in the pan, infomercial kind of stuff that you could get bombarded with on the web or on commercial TV. So let's go with probiotics first, because that's generally a little bit more familiar term to many people. And probiotics are foods that have active bacteria in them. First of all foods have active bacteria in them, but we're talking about probiotics in which there are specific cultures of billions of extra bacteria that are known, for example, lactobacilli, that are known to give off metabolic products when they're in your gut that can do useful things for our health, lower inflammatory rates, the general level of inflammation in our body, that supports our immune system, can help with weight loss. There are some emerging evidence that it helps with glucose regulation and even blood pressure. All of these are strongly and tentatively supported in the literature. So that means they're pretty good evidence, because it takes a very long time for scientists to agree that something's definitely proved. So these are strong associations with good medical evidence. So here's some examples of probiotics. Yogurts. I think you can go into any supermarket and get a probiotic yogurt. And you can look at the label. I would advise listeners to stay away from any product with artificial sweeteners.
Thank you.
Particularly aspartame. They have metabolic consequences on the microbiome that are still being explored. Of course, we don't want to ingest too many sugars, but natural products that don't have artificial sweeteners, probiotic yogurts of that nature, and there are many on the market, are where you want to go. These artificial sweeteners, ironically, we know that sugar is a problem in our diet, but it is proving to be true that at least many, we don't know if it's true for all of them, but many of the artificial sweeteners, for reasons that we do not understand yet, yield a higher tendency, what's called metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is increased adiposity. It's increased fat in the midsection of our body, and it comes around the pancreas, and for reasons, again, that we don't quite understand yet, this is associated with higher levels of diabetes type 2 and hypertension and inflammatory problems. So you want to, as much as you can, stick away from artificial sweeteners. So we have prebiotic yogurts, other products like cucumber dark chocolate, one of my very favorite things, buttermilk. Some pickles, they have to be actually fermented pickles. Not all pickles are actually actively fermented. They're brine, but you have to be genuinely pickled, which are some miso and kefir, which is a product that is unfamiliar to many that aren't strictly into the health field. Now, probiotics, they're a different entity. They are not active bacteria that have been inserted into anything. Probiotics represent the type of nutrients that the bacteria that we've identified with good research so far as being very, very good for our health. These nutrients are the ones that those particular bacteria prefer. Certain types of lactobacillus and bifidobacteria and so on. So these prebiotic foods feed our bacteria that we want to be fed in the way that they prefer. And some of these are chicory root, whole grains, bananas, asparagus, leeks, onions, particularly raw onions, and honey are all good sources of prebiotics. And there are some good prebiotic supplements on the market. Those that are made with chicory root, and you can find them on the web with any easy search. If they're done with inulin and inulin-based oligosaccharides, oligofructose, these are good supplements, and I would say that those people that are dissatisfied with their health, either because they feel as though they've got aches and pains and they have inflammatory problems, they have a tendency to weight gain no matter what they do, they have troubles controlling their appetite, they have problems with obesity, they know that they have problems with glucose regulation, maybe pre-diabetes. It's time to experiment with these things. Again, I'm not presenting these things as absolute cures. What I am absolutely advocating is that people are smart and smart enough, especially with the web backing them up, to go ahead and experiment on themselves patiently over time and see exactly how can I be my best self. There is an optimal you out there, and you have to be empowered to go find it for yourself. And that's my strongest message. But we know that to do that now, you've got to make a partnership, a compromise. You got to feed your microbes the way they want to be fed. When they're happy, you're happy. I know this sounds really weird, but it's a fact. So they used to say, a happy marriage makes a happy man, or something like that, Christine. You could help me.
Happy wife, happy life.
Say it again. I couldn't hear.
I think it's happy wife, happy life.
Okay. Thank you. That's better than I knew. I'll tell you what. Happy microbe, happy you.
Yeah.
Maybe I should write that article. Honestly, I know this sounds really new and different to your listeners, but this is not, just I'm some oddball, idiosyncratic individual coming up with strange ideas or I'm peddling a product. Quite the opposite. This is very good science, and it's a passion of mine. And the sooner we all understand this as a consuming public, the faster we will find that manufacturers can improve the products, or our grocery stores will provide us the products that we want and demand as consumers, or we'll find them available on the web. An educated consumer is the best pathway to getting this concept understood throughout industry.
Well, and you definitely nailed it on the head when you were talking about that there is a perfect you. There's a better you that's inside. I think so many of us, especially around the holidays, but it's not relegated to just the holidays. So many people suffer from weight gain, swollen gut, with little to no food. They're not. I have friends that say I don't eat very much, and yet I have this swollen belly. I have this, they can't seem to lose the weight.
But Christine, allow me to interject. I'm sorry, I hate to jump in, but
okay.
I say it. They're not lying. I'll tell you, I have seen people that eat like horses gain no weight, and I have seen others that eat like birds, and they just have badly distributed weight. And there's a feeling of, well, there's nothing I can do about it. My message is this: well, it's hard, but there might be things that you can do about it, and you should experiment with the things that I've talked about. The specific things for the holidays are interesting. They won't change your year-round style. But the other things I've talked about, which is the smaller portions, which is pre and probiotics, which is experimenting carefully with how to manipulate your satiety center through understanding that it's just not all about you, that you're in partnership with this invisible force that you've got to actually please in a reciprocal partnership in order to accomplish your goal. My message is one: there's hope for those people that feel they are undermined no matter what they do. Now there are new directions to go in.
If you're just joining us, this is Out of the Box Radio, and my guest is Dr. Bill Miller. He has been a physician in private practice for over 30 years. He is the author of The Microcosm Within, Evolution and Extinction in the Hollow Genome. And he is an internationally recognized evolutionary biologist. And we're speaking to him about not just the holidays, but just about our guts in general. And I'm wondering, Doctor, because I'm sure you also have worked with people, or you've done studies with people that are from other countries. Is this something that is more prevalent in the United States? This issue with an unhealthy gut? Because I think there might be maybe some Asian cultures that have more of the fermented, the healthy probiotics in their diets.
You brought up a really interesting question, and it's a little bit more complicated than you might imagine. Here's why. There have been a number of very interesting studies done about the differences between the microbiome and its effect on the health of, and allow me to use the terms, the developed nations and the industrialized nations and the undeveloped countries. Mm-hmm. So this is a concept that some of your listeners may have heard of. It's called the Hygiene Hypothesis. Let me explain. We know from very extensive research now that there are differences in health patterns. So first of all, there's no misunderstanding, just in case anyone is not clear. Every single human being has the same intimate microbiome that you and I have here in the United States. There are no exceptions in the entire world. And more importantly, let me just say that with respect to every organism that you and I can see with our eyes, be it a flea or a polar bear, has the same reciprocating relationship with the microbiome that I'm talking about. There are no exceptions in the entire world. This is what's termed an obligate living circumstance, which is what I write about this a lot in evolution. But my point is, it's true for all of us, and it's true for all of us around the world. But here's the difference. There are regional or countrywide differences in microbiomes, and they have health effects. I'll give you one specific example, and it probably relates to many more things than the one I'm going to relate. This hygiene hypothesis has been closely linked to allergy and asthma. And here's how it works. They have found that the incidence of allergy and asthma is going up very rapidly in industrialized countries, but is not going up so fast in less well-developed, less highly industrialized countries, which means they have larger rural populations. And the question is why? What is going on? And what they're finding out is that there is a general belief that we in industrialized countries are beginning to distance ourselves from our normal companion microbiome. So here's what I mean. In our evolutionary journey, so human beings are at least 200,000 years old. I mean, 2,000 years of human development, at least, as the humans that we are, the Homo sapiens, as opposed to earlier primates. So we've co-developed with an enormous number of microbes they're us, they're part of us. What we're learning is that in the industrialized countries, we're not associating at the same stages of our lives with the microbes that we accumulated during our evolutionary journey, and these other cultures are. How does that happen? Well, you and I know that we grow up, we're in a Purell world. I mean, we have sterilized bottles and nipples, and everybody's washing their hands constantly, and kids aren't, oh my God, a kid should share a toy. A kid drooled on a toy and another kid shares it. The mother's about to die. My kid will die. Kids used to live with farm animals. Here's another big thing. So I grew up in the Pennsylvania area. I lived in the Pennsylvania area a long time. And this is in the Amish region, not far away. Well, in an earlier period, Amish families would live in a two-story structure with the farm animals underneath, and they lived above the barn. So they used the animals for warmth in the harsh Pennsylvania winters, and it saved on heat. It helped their comfort. Kids grew up touching animals, sucking their fingers, rolling in dirt, walking barefoot. Their association with microbes, they don't have more microbes, they have different microbes. But the different microbes are the ones that we've co-evolved with over 200,000 years. Now we are finding means in our much more punctilious, our kind of not sterile, but our cleanliness is changing the distribution of the microbes that are available to us. The end result is we are witnessing a statistically proved substantial increase in allergy and asthma among young people into adulthood that's lasting through adulthood now over the last multiple decades than ever known previously. And it's not simply a function of better reporting, which certainly scientists would think about. But the difference, Christine, is that we're a partnership and we need microbes. And allow me to digress really quickly. So my niece had a child. It was about a year ago, and we went to see this beautiful new baby, and the child was in a bassinet and squirming, and she's got two other kids, and they were crying, and this kid's squirming, and my niece takes the pacifier out of the infant in the bassinet, takes it out of the mouth, plops it in her mouth while she adjusts the diaper of the youngest child in the bassinet. And then she takes it and puts it back in the kid's mouth. And I'll tell you, at that moment, I saw it and my reflexes as an older trained physician kicked in. And I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Oh my God, she's going to kill the kid. And then I realized all of the scientific evidence that I've received and sharing of germs how a family shares germs. And as long as she was clinically well, she had no illnesses of any kind, I realized the kid's not going to be hurt by it. It was not the end of the world. It's probably not the single best practice I've ever seen. But, my message to myself was, Bill, get over it. These microbes are largely good. And it is true that if she was clinically sick, I would have had a fit. But she wasn't. She's perfectly healthy. The kid is all breastfeeding. She's drooling all over her. They're sharing every microbe anyway. It's like if two adults kiss, is it the end of the world for them? No. I mean, humans kiss. What do you think we're doing? We're transferring hundreds of millions of microbes with every kiss. My point is that we live in a wonderful and strange partnership with an almost an alien life form that we have not yet learned to understand. But they are part of us. They're not them, they're us. And when we learn to make this partnership sing for us at every level, Christine, we'll be much healthier for it.
Oh, I agree. 100,000%. But people don't even know, that they exist.
No, I tell you, here's a surprising thing. So I've been doing this very avidly. And my medical observations were what led me to start to think along these lines and led me to write the book, The Microcosm Within, which I will say is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and from my publisher, Universal Publishers, if I'll allow the plug. But the thing that I find frustrating and surprising is how little physicians understand it yet. The pace of scientific knowledge, even though it's amply proved now, is actually quite slow. Knowledge takes a long time. And of course, I'm very interested in evolution and how to understand it properly. And of course, how could you understand a human being as a partnership with the microbes in an evolutionary sense unless you understand that co-development of how did the two come to comprise exactly what we are? And the answer is not in the normal textbooks because they don't know that fact. That was unknown to them. You can't blame Darwin for not knowing that. How could he know? I can't blame a scientist of the 1950s for writing an evolutionary text in which the word microbe is not even mentioned. How could that person, how could she or he know? But now, in our contemporary era, we're still seeing a lot of basic research and a lot of medical research, which really pays no attention to this elaborate partnership that we are. And for the life of me, Christine, I know it's almost a form of evangelism. I welcome greatly this opportunity that you're affording me. People, this is our reality. And it is a little bit surprising to me and slightly frustrating to know that even physicians that read widely are still not aware of most of what I'm saying to you tonight.
Oh, it doesn't surprise me, Dr. Bill, because a lot of physicians too are trained, it's the thing of if there is a problem, then there is a particular solution. And they're also not highly, there's not a lot of concentration or education on nutrition or the food that we eat. It's almost like there's no connection between the food that you eat and your condition,
Yes. And another thing, just to reciprocate with you, because you made such a terrific point. The other thing that doctors are not conditioned to do, although let's not forget, I really admire doctors. It's a terribly hard job. Let me speak from the front lines. It's a privilege to be a physician in every way, shape, and form. But it's also a really hard job and getting much harder. But the thing is, physicians have an instinctive, they recoil from the prospect that you should be your own personal advocate for your own health. I won't say it's like a keeper of the keys mentality because it's unfair to the physicians that I know and love and respect. But there's a feeling that how could they know what to do for themselves? And my message is entirely different. I feel that no one knows better than the individual if they will experiment with themselves in a proper manner. which means they don't jump around every 3 days. They go about it in a kind of reasonably scientific manner. I will try a prebiotic and see how it does for me over 6 weeks. How do I feel? If you are having a problem with your joints aching when you wake up, and almost everyone does as they get older, try a prebiotic and see if that makes you better or not over 6 weeks. If it does, keep it up. If it doesn't, try a different prebiotic or try a probiotic. See if that works for you. Try for weight management. See if five meals, 3 meals and 2 snacks, but keeping the calories the same. See if that doesn't work for you. I mean, sure, it's hard to make these adjustments with our modern lifestyle, as hectic as it is, but people can do it. People can make adjustments. These are all, there's nothing abstruse here. There's nothing unknown here. It's applying common sense things in a determined manner over time, patiently over time, and realizing that there's very strong science behind it. It's not just a fly-by-night infomercial kind of message. It's you can be in charge of your health, and you can definitely improve how you feel, but you've got to work at it, and you've got to make that personal commitment towards direct, singular experimentation. And I don't know anybody that's not smart enough to do that.
Well, no, I'm just kidding. Dr. Bill, I wanted to know if, and maybe there are, or maybe there aren't, but what are the best foods, or what's the best diet for a healthy gut?
There is no absolute answer to that yet. I will say that there's growing evidence that you can eat, first of all, in general, a high carb diet does not win out over high protein, high fat, which is exactly opposite to what we were taught in medical school.
Really?
Really. All the evidence that's in is that high protein diets tend to have higher satiety quotients. They tend to do better. And if you mix in some fat with that, some decent fats, olive oils particularly, polyunsaturated fats, olive oils, stay away, still, it's still the general best term, but the carb loading of the past is over. It's not what your bacteria seem to want. And they don't want a super high fat diet either. So we're back to this old nostrum of balance, controlling portions. And then I think that everyone should experiment with a prebiotic, either the foods or a supplement or a probiotic yogurt, and give it a go. Some people from their cultures prefer fermented foods like kimchi and kombucha and other things, miso. Let them do that. I think that's why some of the guts overseas, some of the Asian cultures are frankly more slender than we. In the United States, where obesity is absolutely rampant, it's a diet-related thing, and it's not solely calories. It is the composition of the diet, how it affects the microbiome, how it influences your satiety, how it influences your weight management. And that's really the new thing. It's not, I used to think when I went to medical school, I thought a calorie is a calorie. And if you're overweight, you're just self-indulgent. Well, I'm telling you, I am completely different now. I don't believe that simple narrative is true. Naturally, some people overeat are heavy. But in general, for many Americans, it's not this simple equation. It's much more nuanced, and that's my message tonight.
Oh yes, no, I know, and another thing too with the carbo loading, it seems to me, now it may or may not be correct, but it seems to me that when you start down that path, like if I have protein, I don't crave 18,000 more servings of protein, but when I have a cracker or a cookie or something that has the carbs, and I don't know if it's the gluten, if it turns into sugar, maybe it's the sugar, I don't know. But, or, if you have, a bagel or something like that, I find that I am, and my friends too, I've talked to them, they're hungry all day long. Like it almost like it's feeding something that is making them want to eat more and more. I don't know if that's just me and my friends, or if that's other people or not.
No, it can't be just you and your friends. We're all human together. We all share almost everything together. Our genes are almost as close to identical as they could possibly be, with the tiniest differences to account for the visible things that we see, which are, as you and I know, the most superficial things imaginable. Right. Compared to every one of our physiological mechanisms, the way that we have our RNA transcripts, our proteomics, all of those essential things that govern our actual lifespan and evolutionary journey together, they're as close to identical as they possibly can be. The idiosyncrasies that we're talking about, as I said before, we share microbiomes. They overlap a lot, but in those small differences. So, for example, I'll make the point as explicitly as I can. We and chimpanzees overlap our genomes by more than 98%. We're not an exact overlap, but we're an awful lot overlap. But that 1.5 or so percent difference, boy, is that different. Our brains are different. Our physiology is somewhat different. Obviously, our phenotype, what that means, what we look like, our morphologies, what we look at when we see each other with our eyes, very different. But when you look at the actual genetic differences and the major metabolic and physiological pathways, they're nearly identical, as they should be when you consider that our primate ancestors are tens of, maybe 100 million years old, and we're 200,000 years of that particular subset. So when we're talking about the cues in diet that will make you satisfied or me not, Christine, you got to be willing to experiment with yourself and be honest and direct and give different things a try, but don't give up until you found the solution. And my message also is there is a solution. There's something that's just right for you. And if you just do the only things that Americans do, you're going to just end up like most Americans, which is seriously overweight. So you have to seize control, a message of empowerment. You're in control, but only if you're willing to invest the intellectual rigor that goes with trying one thing after another patiently, 6 weeks by 6 weeks by 8 weeks, and see what works. And something will click and something will work. And it might take a year or a year and a half, but considering that you're going to live another 50 years or more, what's the diff?
Might as well live comfortably.
And once you find the pattern that works for you, if you do, and you will, each person will, is what I strongly believe. Once you find that pattern, it becomes self-reinforcing. Once you start to feel well, and you know that it's because you found it through your pattern, it's like an addict that has his, and I'll use the term, come to Jesus moment. He just, or whatever you want to say. And he's just no longer an addict, and just flips. I've known, I have a wonderful friend who's 35 years dry. And he came to a moment, he realized he couldn't drink anymore. He stopped and he became his better him. And it's never been a problem for him before. Why? Because it was self-reinforcing. Every day he felt better. And he knows that if he goes backwards towards that old pattern, he'll become his old self. And that in and of itself, that empowerment in and of itself has enabled him to be very happy. compared to being quite miserable prior. And it's really no different. Foods are addictions. Our patterns are in part ingrained by culture and family. You need to do what's best for you, irrespective of what anybody else does, and let other people accommodate your requirements to be your best you.
I think you hit it on the head there with the fact that you have to experiment and find out what's best for you. And it's going to be, if you do play around and find something that works, you're going to feel so good. You're going to want to, it's going to click and you're going to want to continue it. And that's what we want to encourage our listeners to, especially during the holidays, to, like you said, to play around a little bit with these prebiotics and probiotics and see how you feel, because the holidays, we do have that tendency to, we mix a lot of stuff in there, and our little bellies need a little bit of help. A lot of help.
Absolutely. So I know we're coming close to our limit, and I just want to mention a couple of things.
Go right ahead.
As a brief summary for your listeners, in the holidays, slow down. Wait before you decide the next course. Just wait. It's fine. You can have it. Tell yourself, I'm going to have it in 20 minutes, but just wait and see how it works. Experiment for yourself. And then for those that are interested in a really nice scientific feed of information that relates to science and microbes and evolution and things like that, is at Bill Miller MD on Twitter, or Dr. Bill Miller on Facebook. And there's no product being pushed. It's just scientific data as it comes across my plate, and I'll offer it back to you, and some excellent links and tweets from other well-respected and reputed scientists. And if your listeners are interested, they can learn a lot of new things over time.
Dr. Bill Miller, I want to thank you so very much for being with us this hour. And listeners, you can get a copy of his book, The Microcosm Within, Evolution and Extinction in the Hollow Genome. And you can find that, of course, on Amazon, or also go to the Microcosm Within.
CosmWithin.com.
Yes, the Microcosmwithin.com. You can check out and get more information on my guest, Dr. Bill Miller. Dr. Miller, I want to wish you a happy holiday season and a happy gut. I want to wish you a happy gut.
Yes. And as I said, I'm hoping my microbes will make me happy this holiday season. Thank you, Christine. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. And I want to thank you, listeners, for tuning in this week on Out of the Box Radio. I want to thank you so very much for tuning in. Don't forget to catch the show next week. And if you want to never, ever miss an episode, you can subscribe to the program on YouTube. You can subscribe to it on iTunes or iHeartRadio. And you can just look for Out of the Box Radio with Christine. Until next week, bye for now. And also, don't forget to always, always think outside of the box. Bye for now.